Hi, welcome back. You're still watching Morning Exchange here on CNBC Europe. Chinese firms are seeking to escape the ever-increasing mass of copycat companies in China by going global. Lenovo's $1.7 billion bid for the U.S.'s IBM epitomized China's appetite to look west and move up the value chain. But how can Western companies charm the dragon in a bid to profit from an era of Chinese globalization? Dr. John Caslione, President and CEO of GCS Business Capital, joins us this morning. Globalizing your business with China. This is all about working with China, not against China.
Exactly. When you look at the way China is going right now, there's a lot of copycatting that's going on. We know that all around the world. And as much as there's price competition outside of China, it's even more intense in China. So serious Chinese companies, legitimate Chinese companies, are actually looking to how to globalize, how to start to look further. And what they've also realized that in the profit chain, beginning from the manufacturer to the end seller, the brand owner and the end retailer, the end distributor, are the ones that have the highest profits, and the manufacturers have the least. So they're looking outside of China.
Now, what about this Chinese businesses being at the point already that they are looking to go global?
Absolutely. I predict in the next decade, more than any country in the world, Chinese companies will go global.
That's a big number.
And that is a big number. That's a huge number. And the interesting thing is that if you start to look at the amount of investments that Chinese companies are making outside of China, it has grown over 900% in the last 10 years. It's an absolutely phenomenal number. The Chinese themselves are making investments outside of China. Over the last 5 years, more than 10 billion US has been invested here in the EU as well as in America. Okay? So what I'm saying is that I don't think it's going to be earmarked for another market. 1.3 billion people speaking with one voice economically, politically, and militarily. And I think that is going to be one of the most compelling reasons why China is what I call the inevitable superpower.
What about the business sense, though, about the Chinese? If you look at superpower, you've got the U.S., very business-driven, very streamlined. What about China? China seems to be more of a chaotic kind of race. No offense taken.
You know, it's really interesting. If you look at the fact that there are 191 countries represented in the United Nations, there's only one people that you will find in every single one of those countries, and that's the Chinese. The Chinese are the businessmen of the world. Just as the Americans are, in my opinion, the Chinese have a passion for business. And what's very interesting is that while the Chinese government is letting the state-owned enterprises, the SOEs, fail left and right because they just cannot compete in the new market economy, the pragmatism, the intense pragmatism of the Chinese people and the Chinese government, they're allowing them to fail. Chinese people are then being absorbed by the new market economy that's being developed. Just this year, FDI surpassed the United States for the first time ever in January of this year. And on top of that is that whilst we here in Europe will lose our jobs, we will brush up our CV and find a new job, the Chinese start new businesses.
And can they do that in the current legal setup that the Chinese have?
They can do it. Matter of fact, despite what a lot of people may believe, it is very fertile ground. There are more entrepreneurs that have been building businesses and building successful businesses in China. And in fact, if you take it one step further, one of the things that's really plaguing China right now is that they're in their third year of national price wars in a number of industries, which are causing the Chinese businessmen to begin to look outside of China. While margins are shrinking for domestically produced products for domestic consumption, Chinese are starting to look outside their own country, and they are seeking to go global. China is going to have an increasingly rapid rise. I believe that. Now, will they be fits and starts? Of course. They want to become a player. They want to become a respected international, global economic player. You know, it's interesting. We have many firms here in Europe, many firms in the U.S. that are owned by private equity firms that happen to be a European firm owned by a U.S. private equity firm, and vice versa, and Japanese firms. Chinese want to eventually get there. They just want to have their rightful place in that whole scheme. And so what they're doing is they're starting to look at how to acquire the brands, how to acquire the distribution, those things that are going to take many years for them to develop greenfield, and they're not going to do it that way. Chinese, we have to be realistic about what they can and what they cannot do. Right now, manufacturing, low-cost manufacturing, that is their strong suit. And it's in generalized manufacturing. If you're looking at customized manufacturing, specialty manufacturing, here in Europe and the United States, we still do it the best, and including Japan as well. What the Chinese don't have are a long history of core competencies and marketing skills, brand building skills.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's something that we can do. So I see tremendous opportunity for European companies as well as U.S. companies to actually begin to partner, because they have a low cost of advantage in manufacturing right now. It may not be there in 20 years. It may be Indonesia, maybe India, but right now we would be doing the same thing. We Europeans or Americans would be doing the same thing. So there's tremendous opportunity for us to begin to leverage the strengths of both. What I'm seeing right now and what we're working with in Chinese companies is that they're looking at companies that are mostly family-owned businesses, and in China most of the companies are small and mid-sized. Most of the firms here in Europe as well as in the U.S. that really are the backbone of the economies are small and mid-sized, and most of them are under a tremendous amount of stress here in Western Europe as well as North America. It's very interesting too is that Chinese people, I say this in generalization, you get into trouble, generally true, tend to be extraordinarily pragmatic people. I rang up some friends this morning over in China and asking about the mood about the manned space launch today. Fine nationalistic pride, but right to the point, we're looking at what can it do for business? What can it do for business? And that's really what their passion is. So once you begin to establish that working rapport, and instead of what some Chinese see as a model of exploitation that the West is using and going in, low-cost manufacturing, taking the products out, selling it all around the world globally, I believe that the real opportunities and the next emerging trends will be for Western businesses, European businesses, and American businesses to then look to Chinese companies and go global with them.
What can European businesses do to combat the surge in for example, the Chinese textile industry? I know you've been looking closely at the Italian textile industry.
Exactly. It's quite interesting. It's the Western markets, it's the industrialized markets that have set the rules, the guidelines for WTO. And so it's a bit of a lurch and muddle in a way. We go forward, and we shouldn't have not expected the Chinese to increase their exports. I mean, that would be natural. Any one of us would have done the same thing. Again, I look at the governments here, the governments in the United States, between the rock and the hard place. I mean, that's really what it is. You have to protect your small and mid-sized companies. You have to protect your industries. At the same time, when we start to look at imposing import tariffs on Chinese goods coming in, whether it be here, and also there's a bill pending in the U.S. Senate proposed by Schumer, 27.5% import tariffs if the Chinese don't reevaluate the RMB. It's going to hurt the consumer. It's going to hurt the consumer, and let's face it. We look at the economies, whether it be here, and most of the economies here in Europe as well as the United States. We are not surging forward. I mean, it's a bit tentative right now, and the last thing we need is to have a disruption, that'll drive us into a recession. We don't need that. So it is quite a balancing act right now.
John, we're running out of time. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. John Caslione, President and CEO of GCS Business Capital.